Hey everyone, welcome to Show Me the Meaning, Wisecrack's movie podcast.
Show me the meaning! I'm Tom Cruise!
My name is Jared, and we're joined here with a full house here. We've got Ryan.
Hey, film fans.
And Austin.
Hello.
And returning again is Claire.
Howdy.
And for the first time, we have the mysterious co-founder of Wisecrack, Jacob. How's it going, man?
Very good,
Nice
man.
to finally meet you.
Yeah, I'm usually on the comments in the background, so now I'm on camera today.
The man behind the curtain.
That's right.
In the podcast.
Good to have you here. Today we are covering the 1999 film directed by Stanley Kubrick, starring Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman, Eyes Wide Shut. Wow. I'm personally very excited to be talking about this movie, but as always, let's get first impressions. What's it like the first time you watched it, and what's it like revisiting it? Let's start with Austin this time.
Oh shit! So pressure. So for some reason, I have like a really vivid memory of watching the trailer of this as a teenager in my kitchen with my mom, and my mom thinking that this looked really amazing. And so that's like the first impression that I actually have of the film, and I didn't see it until a few years later, because I was like, 15 or something when it was being advertised. So that's kind of the way that I actually still think of my first impression of the movie, if that makes sense. It's almost like when people think about when they talk about Eyes Wide Shut, that's how I remember it. I remember being with my mom, and my mom talking about how beautiful Nicole Kidman is and how weird Tom Cruise is, and how like they're such a mismatched couple. But my mom was like, "Oh, but that movie looks really scintillating," kind of thing. So the first time I saw it, yeah, I mean, I enjoyed it, but I don't think I was as like intellectually refined as maybe I've become over the years with studying philosophy, and in particular studying Freud and Lacan, which this film is not even pretending to hint at, because it's based off of a novel that is intentionally Freudian by a guy who was one of Freud's friends. So it's extremely rich with psychoanalytic principles and ideas and things like that. So from that first moment that was rather unformed to now, it's just been a huge, interesting experience to see my enjoyment and participation in this film change and morph and grow. And I fucking love this movie. There are a couple elements that I think are a bit cheesy and wanky, but I think they actually fit. Like, everyone I know likes to make fun of the Nicole Kidman pot scene as being a bit over the top, but I think it actually really fits with some of the themes that are being explored. So I think this is a really interesting movie, and I enjoy it. And I wish Tom Cruise did more of this rather than trying to be a 50-something-year-old action star, even though American Made was okay.
All right, let's move on to Ryan.
Well, unlike Austin, my first impression of this movie has nothing to do with my mom. I vividly remember
so
I was like...
How Freudian is that?
Yeah, it's so Freudian, right.
I
saw it with my mom, maybe.
14, and I just remember it had come out, and there's been so much commotion about this movie and about the crazy orgy scene, and so I remember seeing the taped copy of it in my dad's office and being like, "Oh shit!" When the weekend came and me and my friends were hanging out, it's like, "All right, hey, let's go see that orgy scene in that new Tom Cruise movie," So that we like were fast forwarding it for a fucking hour and a half or whatever.
Boring. It's like Moby Dick, like skip all the boring parts. Right?
Yeah, and then the orgy scene happens, and it's like, oh man, this is kind of cool, but it's nothing really. It's like there's just blurry kind of masked, totally non-sexy orgy happening.
They can't do anything through those masks.
While he's doing the Gus Van Sant shot of just Tom Cruise's back walking through it, And so I remember being like, all right, well, was that it? Let's see the rest. And then fast forwarding another hour and then being like, all right, well.
That's the movie.
So that was my first impression, was just going through everything except the orgy. But then I became, like Austin said, more intellectually refined over the years. I went to film school and stuff. Yeah. I was like, whoa, there's more to this. And then I remember revisiting it and being like, wow, this is actually way better than the kind of train wreck everyone makes it out to be, because another big part of the movie was he died 6 days after he gave it to the studio. It's not, and then they recut it kind of, so it's not really even his total final cut and stuff. And then they pare down the orgy a lot, which
do we
fuck
have
them.
I didn't know any of that.
By the way?
No, I think that's a myth. I think that
that's not a myth.
That the studio recut it after he died, I think, is a myth.
Well, I mean, it depends what you mean by recut. They definitely did some additional editing.
Yeah, think about it. You give your first cut. A Stanley Kubrick first cut is like probably 3.5 hours.
Well, I thought it was a final cut. I don't know. I mean,
We'll get into that.
We'll
part,
anyway,
yeah,
never
yeah.
know.
But like, I think
What do
he
you mean?
deli-
Whatever. I think it's
he delivered a
documented.
No,
cut.
but like there's his daughter has said that no, he was very, very proud of that final cut or the cut that exists, and that was his vision. I mean,
Okay,
that's what his daughter
I mean,
says.
that probably makes sense. It's Stanley Kubrick. He's probably like,
His
I have
daughter
one
is
cut.
A
What do you mean a rough
Scientologist,
cut?
Just saying.
All
She
right.
is? I did not know that.
Interesting. But anyway,
Yeah, apparently he said that when he saw the preview screening, he said that this is his best film that he's ever made.
well, yeah.
Someone's saying on YouTube that they took out like 36 minutes of his cut. We'll see.
Thank
I
you.
don't know. But
I would highly disagree with Stanley Kubrick that this is
Thing's
Stanley
ultimate
Kubrick's
oddball.
best movie. But, we all disagree. Anyway, overall, I think there's a lot to it. It does not need to be this fucking long. It's so long. It's like me and Jared have this whole discussion with Barry Lyndon because he like gets off on how long it is. Like every second that they just show Barry Lyndon's face in candlelight, he's just like, yes. And I'm like, no.
I feel like the way that you feel about Boogie Nights, like, don't remove a frame. I think it's great.
Well, no,
This one, I
Boogie
think-
Nights. That don't remove a frame. Every single scene matters. Every single moment matters. This, I would say that there's so much of him just sitting there thinking about her fucking that sailor, and like.
Which we're gonna get into the detail of that scene.
Yeah.
All right,
that's my impression.
Naval
All
officer.
right. We gotta get through this. Jacob, what do you think?
I really do not remember my first time watching the movie at all. I remember that I was probably younger. I was much more titillated by all of it, like the sex scenes, the sex as a theme, the characters, seeing Nicole Kidman naked, seeing all these people was like, wow. I remember being much more excited about it. And now when I watch it, I just look at it, it's like high art. Like it's just so good. And every time I watch it, I just find more and more and more and more. I was saying it's like a novel. Like every time you read it or watch it, it's just like, wow. It's so much great choices. So I love it. I saw it last night and loved it more than ever. And it's just...
Hey, I love the movie.
Yeah, it's great.
Usually Jacob and I have an hour-long meeting every morning where we talk about business stuff, but this morning all we did was talk about how awesome this movie is. So I was like, all right, well, we got to bring Jacob on.
But yeah, like, and the narrative of the like all of the lore behind the movie, it getting made, it being the most powerful and sexy couple in the world at the time, the 400 days of shooting, all of that lore makes the whole thing like that much more exciting to like dissect, analyze, and enjoy. So yeah, I freaking love it.
All right, let's move on to Claire.
When I read about the way that he made the film, where he basically just held Nicole Kidman and Tom Cruise hostage in London for 400 days and made Tom Cruise do 95 different takes of walking into a room until everyone was so exhausted that they just like weren't even humans, and that's his, directing method. I was like, oh, this movie makes so much more sense now. Everyone is just like
Exhausted.
Exhausted. Everyone's so exhausted they don't even like know how to act. This totally makes sense. So my first time seeing the movie was last night at 7 p.m.
Oh, I thought you said you had seen it before.
Yeah, I thought I had. Turns out when I started watching the movie, because Jared asked me like, hey, have you seen Eyes Wide Shut? And I was like, yeah, a long time ago, but I'd watch it again. Turns out when I started watching the movie, I found the point about 7 minutes in which I'd originally turned off the movie. So I had previously seen the first 7 minutes of the movie. Sorry, Jared. I thought I was telling you the truth.
Oh, no, I don't mind, but...
Yeah. I thought that I had seen the movie before, but I had started watching the movie before. Did
you like it?
I don't have a comparison to make between the first. I guess I do, and that I didn't turn it off this time. But I didn't see enough of it the first time to really be able to make a distinction like that. I might be the only person on this podcast who has not gone to film school. So I like watching it, I understood how much art there was in it. I was like, okay, follow the rainbow like clothing and costumes. I see you, like looking at fantasy. I get you. But it was really hard to reconcile that with like just how boring so much of it was.
I was like, Ryan, like, yeah.
Thank you, Claire.
Yeah.
Sometimes there is no more profound criticism than it's just boring. And I'm not being facetious. Like, at the end of the day, when I think about The Last Jedi, there's nothing more profound I can say than it's boring.
Yeah, that's the worst sin you could possibly make as a movie.
I agree.
You thought The Last Jedi was boring, but you didn't think Eyes Wide Shut was boring?
Yeah.
I saw Matt Barney's 6-hour film, The River of Fundament movie, and that is real boring. I mean, like, but it's beautiful.
We should make a distinction between boring and slow, though. You know.
Yeah, I mean, so for this movie, I think for this movie,
Jean Dillman or something like that by Chantal Akerman, where it's 3.5 hours of a domestic woman, cleaning dishes and preparing dinner and going through this rote routine, and it's intentionally quote unquote boring because it's kind of subverting what we understand as being a woman on screen. It's subverting what we understand as storytelling, et cetera, or like Satan Tango by forgot his name right now,
or any Michelle Haneke movie.
Bella Tarr, Haneke's films. I mean, I think there's something to say about actually the importance of slow cinema, and sometimes, and I think Kubrick. That's why he lingers in Barry Lyndon over someone's face, and that's why he lingers over Tom Cruise's face, and that's why you get Sidney Pollack answering when. Or not answering when Tom Cruise is talking, or vice versa, and you get these interesting cutaways. And I think there's something really interesting. I actually think most filmmakers, we talk about like Death of God and stuff, or like Death of the Author. I actually think that Stanley Kubrick is intentionally aware of so many of the philosophical themes that we're probably going to talk about in this podcast.
I agree, and that's what makes him a really special filmmaker, is that it's not often that you really have this enigmatic genius auteur who like puts more thought into the movies than most anyone else.
So how about your impressions?
Okay, so this movie is actually very special to me. I remember seeing it in high school, and I was totally captured, and similar to you, I was very titillated. It really affected me, like, in a very psychosexual manner. Like, I remember the first time I saw it in a very basic thing. At the end of the movie, I was like, oh my God, like, this really reaffirms to me, like, I guess what I now later consider to be a very Freudian disposition is that, wow, yeah, everything is about status and sex. Like, I totally see and connect with that. Like, I can see that reality in the universe. But another thing, this movie was kind of a foundational moment for me, because it was one of the movies that really it made me want to learn how to read cinema. So I actually have a book here. I'm going to be drawing a lot from this book and some of the discussion points that we bring up. This is a book I bought in high school. People sometimes email us and ask, like, how did you guys learn how to read cinema? Do you have any recommendations? If you're a Kubrick fan and you want to learn more about, reading cinema in like any kind of traditional way that's more than just kind of fan theories, I definitely recommend this book. It's called Stanley Kubrick, A Narrative and Stylistic Analysis by Mario Falsetto. This is the second edition. I'm sure there's better editions out now. This was a really, just watching Kubrick movies and going through this book was a really, it's part of the reason why I do what I do now. It's just such a rich, interesting movie that, really affected me on kind of a subconscious level. And I immediately read the Arthur Schnitzer movie.
Schnitzel?
Yeah, Traum Novelle. I immediately read that. I immediately read this book. This movie, I wouldn't say it touched me, but it inspired me so much that I just had to devour all the information I could about how Kubrick constructs his movies. What does it mean? How can cinema how is it that cinema was able to inspire me to this extent? One other thing I want to mention, some of the other points that I'm going to bring up, there's a really great essay called Introducing Sociology by Tim Kreider. I don't know if you guys have read that one, but it's also another essay that I read online years ago when I was in high school, and it also very much informed the way that I read cinema and stuff like that. So I've done a lot of research about this movie in the years, so I wanted to shout that out because I might be stealing other people's ideas here. So that's everybody. So let's go into a recap. This is going to be super quick because there's so much to talk about. So Dr. Bill and Alice Harford live a seemingly perfect life. They're beautiful, successful, and well-established in the world of the New York elite. One night, Alice confesses to Bill that one summer she saw a naval officer and fantasized about leaving her comfortable life with Bill just for one night with him. Bill's anger propels him on a dreamlike sexual odyssey through New York, where he witnesses an admission of love from one of his clients, a young girl in a costume shop become a prostitute, a masked orgy in a palatial mansion, and the death of a different prostitute. Bill experiences a series of threats when he inquires further about the nature of the orgy and eventually confesses everything to Alice. Grateful to have survived the debacle, the two vow to do one last thing as soon as possible: fuck.
End of movie.
So many things to talk about here. I'd like to start the conversation off just talking about dreams. Once again, it's based on a book called Traum Novelle, which basically in German translates to dream story. by Arthur Schnitzler.
I read that. Yeah, I read that in high school too. So I must have watched the film around that time.
Yeah. And so there are a couple things that I have written down of ways that it evokes this kind of dream-like setting. But I want to read a quote from Falsetto here. He says, "In Eyes Wide Shut, we never know what to believe, and the status of the narrative events remain unclear throughout the film. Truth and fiction, objectivity and subjectivity, and the public and private are intermingled to such a degree that the viewer remains in a state of constant uncertainty. Nothing in this film can be taken at face value. No final interpretation can be given." So I think that it's definitely, that's commenting on the idea that, there are so many questions, open-ended questions in this movie. Why is the mask on the pillow at the end? What exactly is a dream? What is reality? I think similar to the Inception podcast, there is something about this movie in which there are things that happen in the movie that we ask ourselves, well, is that just some sort of, is that supposed to indicate something plot-wise, or is that just dramatic technique to make it feel more like a dream? Now, part of this dream thing is discussion. I think this film has a lot to say about desire, and so I want to throw it to Austin now because I'm sure this is where you want to bring in the Freud and Lacan stuff.
Yeah, fuck, there's so much to get into, but I would say that the bit in particular with the mask at the end, I think what that is, that's the culmination of her sort of stealing his fantasy, right? So the sort of inciting event, if there is a typical inciting event in this film, is her talking with Tom Cruise while they're stoned about her fantasizing about this naval officer. And the interesting way that it's set up is that he is what Lacan would call like the master to know, right? He's the one who kind of knows everything. He has everything, quote unquote, under control. For Lacan, he sometimes gets criticized by feminist scholars, even though there have been feminist scholars that have then brought or taken up Lacan and tried to reverse this. But the reason they would do that is because for Lacan, only the man is fully articulated into the symbolic order of things, whereas the woman is only understood as being like able to desire, not actually having desire. And it has to do with like the Freudian, doesn't have the penis and stuff like that, right? So women are only like they have secondary status, if you will, in some of readings of Lacan. But what this film does is it kind of reverses that, and it actually gives the power to Nicole Kidman, because what happens is she's the one who has the real fantasy. She's the one that really has the desire, but Tom Cruise doesn't think that she's able to because he's the man, and he understands that men are the ones that have desire. And that's what he says, right? Like,
right. Mm-hmm. We all know what men are like.
All know what men are like, yeah. Yeah, exactly. All men are like this. They're the ones that want to fuck. But women, you guys don't want to. You're just objects of desire. And so she then, in this humiliating outburst of over-the-top acting and laughter, which actually I think really works to serve the scene. What was that?
I said we'll come back to that because I've gone back and forth on. I've waffled on that. Like the acting is great. It's horrible. It's great.
Me
it's
too.
horrible.
Me too.
Last night I was like, oh, it's perfect.
I think so too.
I'm firmly in the camp of hell yeah, Nicole Kidman.
She did a great job on that. Yeah. So, but anyway, keep going. Yeah.
Yeah, no, and I think regardless, I think it fits for the scene and it fits for the concepts that are sort of being expressed or that are on display. And the idea is that she's shattering his ignorance, that he kind of knows all, that he's covering over the potential for there being difference, right? Because he's got it all figured out. And so she just creates a traumatic moment by telling him about this fantasy that she's had. So now then, there's like a reversal of power. No longer is he overpowering her in this duality, but she has now taken the power by letting him know that, no, actually, I desire. And then he becomes the one who is only capable to desire, because all of his fantasizing, all of his exploration is all mediated through his repetition of him fantasizing about her fantasy. So he can only fantasize to fantasize. He can't actually fantasize, which is why all of his sexual experiences ultimately fall. And so the very end with the mask, or not the very end, we'll get there, but the mask, the reason that's so important is because that's her basically taking all of his fantasy into her kind of world. And I think that's what's so kind of profound about that moment. That's why he breaks down, because he realizes that he's been the obsessive trying to control the trauma rather than dealing with the trauma, because that's what the obsessive does. The hysteric lives a lie, but it's based on a truth of a trauma. They just can't accept the trauma or admit it, but at least they're symptomatically living the lie by kind of going quote unquote mad. Whereas the obsessive is the one that can't even accept the trauma. So they have to perpetually reactionary, defer, or repress any sort of encounter with the trauma. And so that's what he does throughout this whole thing.
Austin, what did you think of Nicole Kidman literally performing hysteria? I mean, I guess do want to go back to this scene later, but I figure while we're talking about the hysteric, I couldn't stop thinking about that as she's doing the part of that speech where she's just like laughing uncontrollably and like stomping and like tearing at herself. Like she's performing hysteria in this very unmistakable way. So what do you think about that in regards to your analysis?
I think that would fit right into it, because she's the one who is she's living the truth of the trauma of the experience. Because the trauma is that she, at that moment when she was fantasizing about this naval officer, as much as she said that she had never really been more in love with Tom Cruise, at the same time she was willing to give it all up just to be taken in that moment, which is jouissance, right? That's the pleasure that can destroy, that is like a beckoning with the real, a full encounter with the real, the pleasure that exceeds all possible symbolization, because it is so excessive. She's going to give it all up. But then, of course, she doesn't, because that destroys you when you do that, and she didn't want to destroy herself. But that's why she kind of goes down that path of hysteria, because she's actually being true to the trauma of the fantasy.
What? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to talk about how, so you mentioned repetition, and I kind of want to bridge what you're talking about in terms of desire and how his desire to desire is emphasized through repetition. But I also think that repetition is also within a lot of the form. There's a lot of repetition and there's a lot of doubling. And not only do I think that speaks to the point that you're making, but I also think that it speaks to the overall dreamscape of the movie, in which there are things that are repeated in a very illogical way that would make us constantly cast doubt as to whether what we're seeing is reality or if it's some sort of dreamscape. So for repetition, there's Mrs. Nathanson, who confesses her love to Tom Cruise and says, even if I could just spend one night with you. That is kind of a repetition or a parallel of the naval officer story that Nicole Kidman tells. He's constantly saying, I'm a doctor, I'm a doctor. I think there's a sociological element to that we'll get to later. During the time when...
How does the doctor element contribute to the dream?
I'm just saying that it's a repetition.
Like he just says it again and again.
He just says it again and again. But I think that the more relevant thing there is the sociological reading, which we'll get to. During the point where... so Tom Cruise is in that cafe where he's reading the newspaper and he sees that the ex-beauty queen has died in a drug overdose. You know what I'm talking about? Mm-hmm. Yeah. The newspaper very clearly has certain phrases repeated. Like the sentence, and you would think you're just zooming in too much. It's pretty clear. Like the lens is pretty macro, and you can read it pretty clearly. I mean, this is not as...
I didn't pause it, but I just kind of read what I could read as quickly as possible, thinking there's not a lot to read into it. But what kind of phrases?
It's something like... just like the narrative, it's like, the door was locked and the police could not get in. As the police could not get in, the door was locked, or something like that. So there's also the thing that Claire mentioned earlier about how the two European women who are trying to sleep with Tom Cruise say, we're going where the rainbow ends, and then the story has the rainbow. But there's also a lot of interesting doubling. So we have Sandor Százvas, the Hungarian, and Milic, the Eastern European. We have...
I got goosebumps over how much he creeped me out.
Another very dreamlike doubling thing is that Mrs. Nathanson's boyfriend Carl looks so much like Tom Cruise.
Her boyfriend Carl.
Her fiance.
Greg from Dharma and Greg.
Oh, is it Greg? I thought it was Carl.
No, it's Greg from Dharma and Greg.
From the show.
Okay. They look so much alike. Now, one could interpret that as, well, she's so obsessed with Tom Cruise's character that she finds a fiance that looks exactly like him. But I also think that this speaks to the dream element of it. I think that there's
that fits too, because all the women that Tom Cruise has interactions with are all sort of copies of Nicole Kidman.
Yes, they're all redheads.
Right? They're all tall and slender and light-haired, and they all kind of have defined features. So there's also something interesting about that as well.
Yeah,
I have a general question about this. When you say that it contributes to the being like a dreamscape, like are you saying that what does that mean to you? Like, are you saying that the movie is a dream? Half of the movie, what is not a dream? Or
I'm saying that the movie is deliberately constructed in a way in which there are certain
that it feels like a dream.
Yes, that it feels like a dream, not only in the very soft lighting, but in the fact that things happen that are seemingly illogical or that are seemingly like so hypersexualized as to not even be believable.
And I guess why would that matter? Or I guess
Well,
why?
I think he's trying to construct the dream feeling from with every tool in his box, right? Like
the whole movie. That's what the movie is about. The movie is about a kind of psychosexual dream,
and just constructing that dream feeling, because there's the production design again, recreating New York City streets on a set. The whole thing feels familiar, yet something is off.
Yeah,
and you keep feeling off all the time.
The scene where the guy is following him, and we hear the Ligeti music. There's no way that there would be an empty street like that in New York where one guy's following him. It's not logical.
It's a style.
Yeah, I think stylistic
choice.
choice.
It's a style.
Right, but I guess are you saying the style is the point of the movie? Like
it's a point.
Like
I think it's a big part. I think a big part of it is, can you construct and capture that essence of dreamlike.
Well, to me, the movie is about relationships and gender roles and and class and those kind of things. And yeah, it kind of feels like a dream. And to me, I'd call it more symbolism. I can't exactly tell you what the symbolism is, but just the fact that the rainbow and stuff is happening. I don't think that he's trying to say like, this is a dream. This is what because I don't see what dreams have to do with anything.
The book that it's based off is called Dream Novel.
Well, right. That's the only thing that I don't know why.
At the end of the movie, the final discussion between Nicole Kidman and Tom Cruise, they say, we're very lucky to have gotten out of it, whether it was a dream or whether it was real.
Yeah.
Yeah, because he says something, right? She says, they're talking about forever. And she says, I don't want to think that like one day or even an entire life is the entirety of truth. And then he says something, and I can't remember what it is, but it's something like, or that a dream, what is it? It's something about a dream. Fuck.
I mean, he says something about a dream. And I think that desire and our sexual desire is so embedded in our unconscious, and I think that part of this movie is trying to awaken or shine a light on these very complex nature of desire that cannot be quelled by a life of perfection. People will always desire more, and that desire will haunt our subconscious, and this is like a physical exploration of that.
That's right. I think that's right. It's all about like kind of the psychosexual desire and unlocking what happens in dreams when your guard is down and you let your mind kind of wander.
When you're sleeping.
When you're sleeping, but whether or not the movie or the narrative is a dream or not, I don't think that's relevant at all. I don't think he's trying to define that part, but just the feeling, right? Like,
well, it's like in The Shining. There is no way that there is no logic of what happens in The Shining. There's no logic.
The Shining involves supernatural ghosts and stuff, so that makes more sense.
No, it doesn't. I mean, like there's no even supernatural ghosts. I mean, there's no evidence that it's ghosts and not a demon spirit or an Indian burial ground. It's vague. It's deliberately vague, and that's and the line between reality and dream here is similarly vague.
And that's been my maturity just growing up and watching movies over time. I used to try to decode confusing things all the time, and then I realized, like with any story, whether it be a novel or film, it's like that's the point. It's
much more about evoking a feeling and capturing and
asking the questions
and like instilling in you a state of mind.
Well, no, I mean I like mysterious movies that are ambiguous, that don't explain everything. That's different to me than some stuff that he does in this movie where there's very much loose ends that don't lead anywhere and kind of
disappointing.
Yeah, I'm not even saying it's disappointing. I'm just saying that in terms of like a narrative structure, it's not really logical.
I wonder if we're supposed to wonder, and I certainly did, how much of this movie is he high for? Because they smoke, whatever they're smoking when she gives her whole confession is apparently pretty strong.
That is a great point, Claire.
I live in Oregon. That looks like pretty strong stuff.
That's strong shit.
Yeah, and then
I think it looks
immediately
like
leaves
weed,
after that.
And they don't look very high.
I didn't see any crystals on that weed, but go on.
They probably used like a baggie of oregano. I don't know, but Nicole Kidman, it was toasted as fuck. So he goes out in this cab and starts his whole series of encounters, and at what point is he no longer high? He's clearly still high during the whole encounter with like the grieving daughter of the guy who died, because just like in terms of time he would be, and then he meets Domino. He's probably still at least on a residual high during the whole thing with Domino. I'm just like trying to walk through it and think about how much of this, like, is there, how much of this is he still
That's my
high
favorite
for?
interpretation, is that the whole thing's a hallucination from some really crazy Nicole Kidman weed. I mean, look at her acting job. That explains the acting job. That explains the spazzing out. That explains everything that doesn't make sense. Thank you, Claire.
Well, by the way, this is our 420 episode.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Right.
You got him.
But
Shit. Yeah.
I mean, I think that to the point of like whether Nicole Kidman's acting is good or not, or if she's like overdoing it because like no one's that kind of whimsical or whatever when high. But I think that the way that she talks, even when she's dancing with the Hungarian guy, is very like evocative of
she's
just kind of
drunk
this. Yes, I know. Well, I mean, there are substances always motivating her kind of weird speech, but I think that it's supposed to kind of seduce you into this kind of soft, dreamlike hypnosis. I mean, I think stylistically, if we're to believe that Stanley Kubrick took 95 shots of every line, and those are the ones that he picked, and I think there has to be a reason.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, I still don't see what it has to do. I guess the best thing you've said that explains that is that their desires are kind of like your dreams, and so that's why you'd make it a dream statey kind of feeling. Because it really doesn't feel that dreamy, except for those weird,
I disagree.
I think it's so dreamlike.
I disagree.
Logical parts that you're talking about.
There's a significant use of dissolves. There's dissolves all over this movie.
Yeah,
to me,
very slow
He uses
dissolves.
those all
There's
the
very
time.
soft lighting.
But the dissolves are all about literally like the passages of time, because like there's so much thinking in this movie. It's like he's just like, all right, if I'm gonna show someone driving somewhere, I'm gonna show it dissolve 5 times so that you feel like you fucking drove there. I feel like it's a utilitarian function.
And he uses dissolve a lot in this film, doesn't he?
He uses dissolve a lot, but I disagree. I mean, because there are just as many points in the movie where they portray a passage of time through a hard cut. I mean, I think the dissolves, definitely the use of them and the soft lighting. If you notice, the movie is actually quite grainy. I don't know what you guys watched it on. I watched it on my TV on Blu-ray, and because there was a lot of natural lighting, and they had to actually push the film a couple stops.
I saw it like on the scenes when he's walking outside on the streets, like that.
I just
his
assumed that
chest
was
is super grainy.
1996 quality of film.
Well, it was.
God, but so much of it. Let's just all say it is so timeless, though. Like the look, for it to be almost 20 years old now. It was shot in 96, actually more than 20 years ago. It looks beautiful. It's so like glowy and
I think
gorgeous.
I actually at the end when they're in the
I wanna
toy
hear
store,
Claire.
I actually thought that. I was like, oh, this movie's 20 years old. I was like, but in terms of the way that the sort of production quality,
Timeless.
let's say, I was like, oh, I didn't think it was that old. I was thinking like, maybe like the early knots, but I was thinking like, 2005, 2007. And I was like, no, wait, this is still a 90s film. It was shot in like 97, 98.
I'm an old soul. This is the standard for what looks good to me. Like CGI shit in Black Panther. That's what looks like shit to me.
There's some CGI in that fucking orgy
100%
scene, dude.
Well, only if you watch the censored version.
And I think that Tom Cruise is on a green screen in the cab. when
Wait,
he's
we
driving.
No,
can
it's
watch
rear.
an
It's rear
uncensored
projection.
version
It's
that's
rear
available?
projection. There's a version of the movie that came out in theaters where they actually superimposed more CGI hooded figures that obscured the actual penetration.
I assumed that's the one that was on Netflix.
Oh, that's what I
There's-
saw. I think that's. Oh no.
Oh, you saw the shitty one, man.
I
Fuck
did,
that.
did,
I had
actually.
that. I got that. I
I
got
don't know.
that.
I
I got
just
that.
saw whatever was on Netflix.
Maybe that's
but
why
it
I was like,
probably
man,
was
this
that
is not nearly as titillating as I remember. Because I was like, man, these are like super boring. I mean, this is like reading like Rolling Stone or something. Like, okay.
I mean,
Maybe I would have been like way more into
Yeah,
it.
we
if
got to get
I
another
had-
copy of
no.
that.
Well,
Okay.
Oh, it's on
okay.
Netflix actually
This is
too.
hilarious.
I actually don't think that the orgy is meant to be erotic or titillating.
That's probably right.
If you look at this scene, and I know I'm focusing much on film form here, but I think this is Kubrick. Like, he's the man. But so in the scene where the famous orgy scene at the beginning, when we have all those women with their cloaks on and then they take off their cloaks and they're naked, the lighting is directly like top down lighting. Like, there are all these like really ugly shadows under the women's boobs. I mean, these women are gorgeous. They're like flawless. But I think they're shot in a way that doesn't actually make them look that appealing. Like if you like, that's
They're
certainly
like
not
objects on display. It's
right.
a
Exactly.
spotlight.
Exactly. There's like and I think this is more to the sociological reading, is that they are commodities, you know, and it's not meant to be erotic. It's meant to be that, like, look, these people are being
Objects
exploited,
that are consumed like the case of 25-year-old whiskey or whatever.
or the case 25, or the things that you buy during Christmas. And this is it takes place during Christmas.
It's a Christmas story.
It is. It's a Christmas movie.
I think you're right that they're framed as commodities, but like, given the sociological context of that, I don't see how that precludes it being erotic, because a lot of our eroticization has to do with treating people, especially
That's right.
women, as commodities.
That's right. That's true.
Well,
Yeah,
I would.
objectification
Sorry, go ahead.
So no, yeah. So I was going to say, I'm glad that Claire brought that up, because I think it isn't that it's not erotic. So many of the people that reviewed this film when it first came out were disappointed because they thought it was going to be hot and sexy and steamy, which means that they're projecting their own expectations of what the fantasy is, right? That erotic and hot and steamy is like, the lighting is beautiful, and they don't sex scenes, or they've got this particular type of music in the background. And there's
To be fair, there was a very misleading trailer.
It was marketed that way, Austin.
Yeah, I mean,
fuck
the marketing team.
Well, that's why they brought back
yeah, right.
That's why they made their money back. They had 165 million at the box office.
Get asses in seats.
Yeah, right.
But what this film does is it subverts that, because it kind of confounds the quote unquote male fantasy again by making it just pure sex. And I think the dance with the Hungarian is really interesting, because he's talking about, that why did women used to get married? It was so they could lose their virginity, so that they could do the thing that they actually wanted to do. So there was like this law or this symbolic order that was preventing people from actually living their fantasies, and so people have to go through the law in order to be justified to do it. But again, that's all through the sort of male perspective, right? I don't want to say the male gaze. A lot of people talk about the male gaze. That's not what Lacan meant when he's talking about the male gaze. It's not just that it's filtered through the kind of a dude's desire. That's not quite what it is. It's a little bit more self-referential, but that doesn't matter. But the point is that he's kind of exploring this idea that, oh no, you can just do what you want. You can just purely quote unquote fuck, right? And you don't have to have these fantasies that condition the romance or the symbolic. You don't have to have those things that condition your desire to just libidinally fuck. And I think that's kind of something that you see that's on display in the weird orgiastic rituals, is all that other stuff is stripped down, and this is just pure fuck.
Yeah,
I don't understand that at all. I mean, the orgy, it seems, is the very opposite of that. There's so much ritual and I guess I'm just going to keep saying ritual over and over, but they take what could just be fucking. It could just be a swingers party, right? But they take that swingers party and they put layer upon layer of like pseudo religion on it, and like costumes and myth and like
I think
all
that's
of
like
these other things.
That's the sort of projection of like the Illuminati and these sort of groups that you kind of you would put religious ritual onto something that's naughty in order to make it feel more legitimate.
Yeah, and no, I totally agree with that. I'm saying I don't think that orgy is a good example of everything being stripped away except for like pure fucking.
Well,
So
in
I
a
just
pure
wanna-
Lacanian sense, nothing can escape the symbolic order, right? So even the kind of pure fucking would still have a different form of symbolic order. But that's kind of the point, is that it's just subverting one symbolic order for another symbolic order. But it's guised in this idea of pure like animality, which psychoanalysis says it doesn't actually exist. There's no such thing as like the pure animality, even if that's what you're striving to do. Does that make sense?
So I just want to clarify what I meant by it not being erotic. I guess so you're right, Claire. Like if you watch a porno, the women are definitely being commodified, but there's like, just the way that they're presented is to like optimize their their sexuality or their beauty. Whereas I think that this movie almost goes out of its way not to kind of make them pornographic. I mean, despite them being beautiful, they are not lit like they would be in a porno, which, the primary reason to watch is to get off.
And that wide shot of the orgy, it's all wide shots. There's no close-ups. And to me, the steamiest part of the whole movie is when Nicole Kidman's just sitting there in the mirror, you know, and there's that
That's
that,
right.
that thing,
The bump, bump,
you know,
bump.
yeah, and like and it feels, and then they cut right before, you know, they're about to do it. You know,
See, I
That's
don't
my favorite part too.
She's hot, but I see that as actually, I mean, I think
that to me that's the scene that's shot the most like your
Gorgeous.
standard erotic like
Glowy,
psychosexual
yeah,
thriller
but she
movie.
is like looking in the mirror, and I don't think she's happy with her reflection. I think that's what we see, like a kind of dissatisfaction before it cuts.
Oh, I didn't see that.
Well,
I can
oh, yeah,
almost
yeah.
feel
Well,
Austin
there
like
is that
chomping
habit.
at the bit to say something about the mirror stage. So like, go on.
Let me just
I want to talk about the
let me
ritual,
let me
too.
just bring up two more things, and then we're going to move on. One thing I want to bring up more to this, making it a dreamscape. I noticed that this time watching like the moving camera and the steady cam shots are,
Wobbly.
well, they're not wobbly, but we see not only in like the extravagantly wealthy areas, we see much more of a moving camera, but also I think in the scenes that are more, have the softer lighting, have the kind of, you know, questionable reality, whereas the shots like in Domino's apartment are static, that we're meant to believe that perhaps these are like the real scenes. And then, all right, so that's what I always want. That's the only thing I wanted to bring up here. The other thing I wanted to bring up, which maybe seems a little obvious, but more to the idea of this movie being almost like, you know, like a, to be crass about it, like a wet dream. You know, it's like everybody, they're like sex, similar to what Austin said in the Videodrome podcast, sex is just dripping through this movie, even when there aren't any naked people. Everybody is fucking each other. So obviously everyone wants to fuck Tom Cruise. There's Domino. Alan Cumming's character is is hitting on him, Mrs. Nathanson. And one part that I found particularly subtle is when after the orgy, Tom Cruise is looking for his friend Nick Nightingale, and he goes to the cafe and he asks the waitress, "Do you know Nick Nightingale?"
And she's like, "Oh yeah."
And she says, "Oh yeah," but not only that, she knows
his hotel.
she knows where he's staying.
Yeah.
That suggests they
for
probably have had an affair or they fucked or something
sure.
like that. So there's just sex dripping through everything here, you know, and like
And
that's
even
that's
Sidney
kind of
Pollack is like, "Oh, and Nick is back in Seattle, probably fucking Mrs. Nick." You know?
right. Yeah. Sidney Pollack's so good. All right, I want to move on to the sociological reading. So this essay, Introducing Sociology by Tim Creeder, was a big influence on me and is very much influences the way I read this film because I think he did such a wonderful job. But I think that, to summarize his argument is that basically we're all whores in some, there's a lot of whores in this movie, a lot of prostitutes. And I think that the point that Creeder is trying to make about this movie is that we're all someone's whore. So
Go on.
okay. So first of all, the reason why the essay is called Introducing Sociology is because in Domino's apartment, when Tom Cruise takes the call from his wife, we see on her bookshelf there's a book called Introducing Sociology. So now, if we believe all the myths that Stanley Kubrick was an ultra perfectionist and, you know, had like so much control over every detail, then I think we should perhaps believe that everything is deliberate. So to Creeder, he suggests that this book and in context of the film suggests that we should look as prostitution as the basic defining transaction of our society. So let me just read a couple things that he said. Alice's obvious resentment of her husband, which she only expresses when she's dreaming or drugged, is motivated by her unconscious recognition that she is a kept woman. We know Bill's supporting her art gallery having gone broke. She tells Savas that she's looking for a job, but we don't see her looking. Mostly, we see her being looked at. Alice's role as a voyeuristic object is defined by her first breathtaking appearance and her first online screen, which is, "How do I look?" Everyone she encounters the first 15 minutes is constantly complimenting her appearance. He goes on to say, being beautiful is Alice's job, as much as it is for call girl Mandy or the hooker Domino. During the quotidian life of the Harfords montage, in which her husband examines patients at the office, we only see Alice tending to her toilette, brushing her daughter's hair, hooking a brassiere, applying deodorant. Hers is the daytime regimen of a courtesan devoted to the rigorous maintenance of her looks. She's associated more than any other character with mirrors. Her expression in the mirror as she watches her husband making love to her, which is the thing we're just talking, the film's most iconic image, begins as bemusement, giving way to fondness and arousal, but in the last seconds before the fade out, it becomes something more ambiguous. Distracted and self-conscious, this is her moment of clearest self-recognition, an uncomfortable glimpse of what she really is. So what is what that she really is? Well, to Creeder, Alice's real status, is unmistakably suggested as the wife as prostitute. She's identified with the hooker Mandy through a series of parallels. They're both tall redheads with a taste for numbing drugs. We see them both in bathrooms, blah, blah, blah. Alice is also associated with the streetwalker Domino by the purple of the sheets and Domino's dress and their conspicuous dressing table mirrors.
Oh, yeah.
So basically, the similarities between them are more revealing when read the other way, as insinuating that Alice is just another higher-class hooker. When we see her later in the film, in a toy store, she's surrounded by shelves full of stuffed tigers, which is the exact same stuffed tiger that is in Domino's bed. Even in this scene, as she delivers the film's ostensible moral, Alice is visually linked to the doomed hooker. So one thing that I think...
Well, let me just stop and say I've got chills, hard nipples, and I'm very excited right now.
Yeah,
that was awesome. Mind blown.
So only just one of my criticisms of Creeder's essay is that I don't think it's only women as prostitutes, because I think there's a very important line at the beginning where Tom Cruise, basically, he is Victor Ziegler's whore.
Yeah.
He says when they enter the party at the beginning, Nicole Kidman asks him, like, how did you get invited to this? And he says, this is what you get for making house calls. He's basically just
he
saying,
makes
like,
house calls. He knows nobody.
Yeah, it's like
he's
like a prostitute. He just shows up.
I've got to show my face.
He shows up, services the elite, and he gets paid by being invited, to mingle with the societal elite.
Yet he'll never be one of the big crowd, the big dogs.
Right.
He's not allowed into the big party.
And so I think that a big theme here is that sex is very much an economic transaction. So yeah, that's kind of the gist of Creeder's argument, which I found to be pretty interesting. What do you guys think about that?
I mean, I'm reminded of Engels talking about how the first original division of labor was in the household, of woman becoming domesticated, and then you get that economic shift, if you will, in the kind of transactional relationship through sexuality. I mean, I think there's something really interesting about that. John Berger talks about the idea that he was like a philosopher of art and cultural critic and things like that. But he talks about how, like, women generally, if you look at art, even in Victorian pictures, they bear the status of being looked at, where the man, even in fashion, the man is able to actually wear clothes that are functional or that are that are pragmatic, that are practical. The male garb in the Victorian era was like a modification of like riding gear, so that you could ride a horse, whereas the women were always dressed either in what they are covering up or what they're not covering up, and that's what you get in this sort of looking and looked at dyad between the male and the woman. And so again, this kind of goes to the idea that the woman is being defined in her relation as not being man. But I do think there's something interesting that we're all kind of whores. That then what this would imply, if I can, and I know that I've just been Lacan heavy this episode, but if I can, then the male is a whore to the symbolic order. He's fully inculcated. He's fully defined by the rules and the laws and the codes of the expected order of the day. So what is Bill's job? He's an upper middle class doctor, right? So he's a slave to the economic order or to the social order or whatever. So there is something interesting in that.
I think that when you say symbolic order, I think of the orgy scene as that symbolic apex of societal order and desire and how one plays into the other.
Yeah. I can see that. I mean, again, I think everything is a symbolic order. You can't ever really escape it. If you could escape it, you would destroy yourself. And that's what happens when you encounter the quote unquote real, right? Which is just the excess, the radical excess of desire or pleasure, and it destroys your identities. It's like, I wrote something recently on my Facebook. I was thinking about like Nietzsche's Death of God, and yeah, we think of Nietzsche's Death of God as being like the death of capital G God, but what if it's also just in thinking of the eradication of the identities that we've clinged so hard to, or like your faith in your parents. When you think that when you're a boy, I thought that my dad was like this perfect fucking human, and then you start to realize, oh, he's just a human like everybody else, and he makes mistakes, and we all fuck up. And And then sometimes, our patriotism and our country gets destroyed. You think unwaveringly as a little boy that America is this great bastion of freedom. And then you start to realize that, oh, maybe it's not that. Maybe there are cracks in these images that I've clung to so much. And anytime that happens, that's when the dissolving of the symbolic order is taking place. And that's almost too much for your previous identity to deal with. So you have to transform, or you get destroyed. And so then what you do to transform is you take up a new symbolic order, right? There has to be some unwrapping and then rewrapping, if you will. So I think that's kind of takes place, that orgy scene is just a different symbolic order.
Austin, since there's been kind of an emphasis on the symbolic order in this episode, do you mind just doing a brief explanation of the imaginary versus the symbolic versus the real, just so that we kind of have something to attach that to if you're not as familiar with Lacan?
Yeah. So basically, the real is the kind of pure state of excess. Sometimes people attach it. Lacan's ideas himself changed on this quite a bit, and so there's a bit of an inconsistency in his work. But it is like the pure excess, the really real, that which completely escapes capture through language or codification or through law or through order or anything like that. The symbolic, however, is the kind of pure realm of I guess we could say of law and of kind of control, of ordering things. It's the way that we sort of are able to engage with the world. We engage through the symbolic. We engage through the codes of society, the laws of society, the identities that are granted, and things like that. And then you have things like fantasy, where fantasy is kind of the correlate of the imaginary, where fantasy are these things that are mapped onto the symbolic. They're not the real. They can be informed by the real. He uses the word touche or touche, which is basically like the encounter with the real. And it's you can't fully experience the real because it would completely dissolve the symbolic order, and so you would be destroyed in your identity. But you can kind of encounter little grazings, if you will, of the real. The real can touch you a little bit, and it can push you in a certain direction, and I think that's one of the things that this film does. And so the fantasy is kind of a way of kind of suppressing and living, if you will, in that sort of tension between these encounters with the real and then the control of the symbolic order. And really what this triad that Claire's referring to is sort of his modification of Freud's id, ego, and superego, where the id is kind of the idea of the pleasure principle, and the superego is the structures of society, and the ego is self-reflection. And so you kind of get that here, but for Lacan, he's opening it up so that it isn't just simply about the individual, but it's more socially determined. So the identity isn't just something that is contained within like the body or within consciousness or self-reflection or something, but it's something that's structurally organized through the linguistic order, through the social order, through the codes and the laws of the society in which you take part that constitutes your very being or your identity, let's say.
So when we finally escape the simulation we live in, that's the real too?
That would be the really real. But then that's what's so great. So in The Matrix, what does Morpheus say? Welcome to the desert of the real, because even when you peek behind the simulation, you just get another simulation. And the reason it's another simulation is because there's the second one where Neo is actually able to use his powers from the Matrix in the quote unquote real world. So even the real world is kind of not the really real, right?
That's for a different.
That's how we transfer to Baudrillard.
Yeah,
Boom,
and that's where we do for a different podcast.
Everyone all the fans want to know why you love Dr. Pepper. Are we sponsored by Dr. Pepper?
I'm not. I'm a caffeine fiend.
Yeah, Mr. Pibb.
So is the only one not a whore in the movies Pollock, Sidney Pollock?
No,
he's
a
gone,
whore.
right?
Potentially.
He's a
Maybe he's a
whore
whore
for
to the
sure.
system. Oh, I guess he's running. I mean, isn't he?
Who's he a whore to?
Well, it
He's
seems
a
like
whore to those elites because he's talking about them
Yeah.
like they're powerful people,
And he
you
feels
don't want
like-
to know who they are.
right, and
true.
he feels like he's threatened, and he's trying to protect himself and getting this guy followed just so he can save his ass. And he's like, I got in big trouble because of Nick. I'm the one who vouched for that guy.
Yeah.
I think he's also a whore. I guess I don't.
For those who don't know, Sidney Pollock's an awesome
Oh my God, the
movie
best.
director who directed
Tootsie?
Tootsie, coming.
The Firm,
The Firm, the African movie.
Out of Africa.
Out of Africa. Yeah, that's what I was talking about.
Were you gonna say Coming to America?
Coming
No,
to America.
I was thinking Coming to America,
love that movie.
but then I
That's
realized
Mr.
it's out
Landis.
of Africa.
Right,
instead.
right.
So I just want to talk a little bit more about the concentration, or I'm sorry. I want to talk a little bit more about the emphasis of class gulfs. It's like as Tom Cruise is getting closer to the orgy scene, it's almost as if he's like going on this odyssey and almost like a survey of the sociological landscape or the class landscape. So when he goes to Domino's house,
Yeah, he's like, wow, this is how real people live. It
he's
looks
like,
almost like that.
he says it's cozy.
I was thinking the camera might not be moving like sweepingly because there's not a lot as much space, maybe.
Well, but I mean, yeah, that's probably a practical reason.
But it's a little more in focus because like, the lights are always glowy and kind of soft, and in her apartment,
It's
the
Christmas
tree is like
lights.
crisp. Yeah, the Christmas lights, but the Christmas lights are always glowy. Like at the big house at Ziegler's house, it's like super soft. There, it's firm, it's hard, it's in focus. Everything's a little more real. There's like the breakfast in the pan, all that kind of stuff.
It's probably the only reason you made this movie.
I know that it's like a really common thing to love, but you know, as a brand new viewer, I really loved it. The repetition of "I'm a doctor," and that seems to be a really important kind of class cue. Is he almost always uses that with people who presumably have like a lower socioeconomic status than him. So like talking to a concierge or a waiter or like a costume shop owner.
It's his way of granting himself access, right?
Everyone
Like,
trusts
it's like
doctors.
it's his
like
password.
a badge of trustworthiness.
Right.
Yeah.
That's his little password. He's like, it's okay, I'm a doctor. And he uses that even in a lie later, right?
So another thing that Creeder says that's interesting. First of all,
Hey, wait, Claire, will that work for us? Like, can we?
Yeah, we're
does that work
doctors.
with
I'm a PhD. You should just carry your diploma.
Would that work with us? Can we do that?
Next time you're on a plane and they're like, "Is there a doctor on board?" You should definitely stand up.
Not you.
It's okay. I'm a podcaster.
yeah. It's okay. It's okay. I'm on YouTube. So Bill's first line in the movie is, "Have you seen my wallet?" And
I noticed that.
I didn't notice that. And
So-
that's his little pass.
Another thing I've
Would be
read that
pass.
I don't know if I buy this, but so Kubrick has this tradition of like kind of deliberate names. So Jack D. Ripper in what is that in Doctor Strangelove, and then Private Joker in and this one is Dr. Bill, as if like Bill like dollar bill.
Oh, that's
like,
interesting.
Okay.
Maybe.
Hadn't thought about that.
He's got endless bills. I was saying it's like a magic trick. Like that wallet folds in half, yet he has like countless
$700.
hundreds.
Yeah.
No,
Like,
much
I used to have a
more
dream.
than that. Countless
I used to have a
hundreds.
dream where every time I opened my wallet, it had like $500 cash in it.
Oh,
but
that's
then
beautiful.
instead of just like spending it, what I would do is just sit there and keep accumulating it by closing it and opening it and closing it and opening it.
Right. Money dreams.
I don't think
If you
Mark's
tore
would
if you
approve
tore
of
one
that.
in
Yeah, I don't
half
think
and
Mark's would
gave it
approve
to
of
a
that,
cab
Austin.
driver, would it like magically sprout the other half? I felt so bad for that cab driver.
I know, what a dick,
I
right?
know.
I think
That's a
that
dick move.
I also think that's
it reminded me of like those bum war things. Remember where guys would be like here to a
Bum
homeless
fights.
person and they'd give him money to make him fight or whatever.
another form of-
I was walking down the street here in Sydney and there were these fucking guys and I almost said something. I wish I would have, but there were like 6 of them and they were huge Aussie fuckers. But they were making this homeless guy do push-ups for money. And I was like, that's fucking sick, man. Like this idea that you can exploit somebody just because you are in a level of material comfort that's
Yeah,
higher.
I didn't even
Right,
think about
yeah,
that.
but-
Like him with
but-
the taxi cab driver is just like other prostitution, right?
I mean, you say that's disgusting, but like I think what this movie is trying to say is that
We all do it.
that's literally how society functions. Like it's
Yeah,
you know
this
like
is why
that's a
philosophers hate themselves.
that's
and
a
become depressed.
that's a microcosm, but literally like that symbolic thing of hey, I pay you and you humiliate yourself is literally the fabric of society.
Right. Can we attempt the chant at some point today too? No. I think he's saying Rupert Murdoch. Rupert Murdoch.
Yeah, you know what? I think that's the hidden meaning.
That's the hidden meaning of Eyes Wide Shut. We're done. Mic drop.
Okay, but for real, is he talking about the Illuminati?
Oh man, it doesn't matter.
You know what I did? I YouTubed because after I watched this movie, I was like, I bet you Alex Jones has something to say about this movie, and I YouTubed
God.
Eyes Wide Shut Alex Jones, and sure enough,
Yeah.
you know all the what is it? What is the thing that
Bohemian Grove is
Podesta did that Alex Jones' spirit cooking. You know what I'm talking about?
No.
It's not worth going into. I mean, I don't want to go too much into the rabbit holes of like, Stanley Kubrick was killed because he exposed the Illuminati. Like, you haven't heard that?
Makes a lot more sense
than a heart attack after Final Cut.
Yeah, right.
I mean, what I read is he delivered the cut and died hours later. Like he died of a heart attack hours after delivery, which is
I read it was
crazy.
3 days
Oh,
after.
well, see
this
all
is
these accounts.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. It adds to the lore. It makes it so fun.
Yeah.
Have you guys seen Room 237?
Oh yeah, I love that fucking movie.
hate it.
Hates it. This is great. I'm standing in the middle of it, or sitting in the middle
Should
here.
we do that for let's do that for the Shining podcast?
Okay. Sorry, I'm derailing you.
Okay, one more thing I want to do about the way that women are portrayed is I want to talk about the daughter Helena and the daughter of of Milich, the costume guy. So one of the things that I find interesting is that a couple times the daughter of Milich is framed with the mannequins in the background, as if this want more of like a objectification of women thing. So Creeder also points out this thing. So first of all, Nicole Kidman's character is always grooming her daughter Helena, and her name Helena, Creeder points out, is named after the most beautiful woman in history, as if she's grooming her to become a high-ticket item like herself. So not only do we see during that montage that I mentioned earlier, we see Helena's hair being brushed, learning to groom herself. But then in another interesting part that I found kind of amusing was Creeder claims that it's relevant that when Nicole Kidman's character is helping Helena with her homework, the math problem that she's doing is teaching Helena how to discern which male or which boy has more money.
No, I didn't even think about that either. Man, jeez.
Whoa, I didn't catch that.
Yeah,
what's the story? It's like Billy has $250.
Yeah, it's Billy has $5, and then Josh has $250. Who has more money? Is the problem that she's teaching her daughter?
That's my favorite point of Krieger so far.
So you don't buy this in general? The Creeder argument,
the horror thing.
Yeah.
No. I think it's interesting. I'm absorbing it.
All right. Next thing, let's talk about the title. What does it mean?
Wait. We barely talked about the two girls. I feel like there's a lot more to say on that.
Please.
Yeah, I was really intrigued by the portrayal of I think Milich's daughter.
Yeah.
How she's obviously underage, like very much so, and she's obviously being like sold into prostitution by her father. And I think we are kind of conditioned to expect someone who's very obviously kind of being sold into child sex slavery on film to be scared or vulnerable, and instead like both her body language and the things that I don't know if she says anything, but if she does, like the whole way she conducts herself is the very opposite of that, as though she's in on this, which was I think disturbing, but maybe intentionally disturbing. And I wanted to know what other people thought. Like, what is Kubrick trying to do there? I mean, he was the guy who gave us Lolita, so.
Well, really, Nabokov did, but yeah.
There's also there's a line when she whispers in his ear, which I remember many years ago. And then I didn't do this viewing, but I put on subtitles to see if we could discern what it was that she was saying. And she says, "You should get a cloak lined with ermine." So she's effectively giving him a clue as to what to wear. This is only in the subtitles because you really can't hear. It's not even mixed to be able to hear it all. Which makes me wonder, did she know what this party is? And it also seems like Milich is like, oh, cloak, a mask, and this. Like, it sounds like you're going to that thing. I don't know if that was in there too. But anyway, but when she is suggesting what he should get, he doesn't end up getting that. He doesn't get ermine at all on his thing. But I'm just curious, what did that mean?
I think that one of the things about this movie, and I think this more kind of comes to the ambiguity in the dreamscape, is that we're constantly questioning who is at this party.
Right.
I think that even the mask thing and the dream that Nicole Kidman says, I don't think we're meant to literally think that Nicole Kidman was at the party.
Right.
But I think that there are hints at that.
It could also be read as there's a world out there that I don't belong to. I'd like to pretend like I could be there. And he gets that feeling of being able to get there, but then is quickly pulled back, and then that plays into the whole class structure thing. And then again, you're like, who's at that party? Who's important? But it's a little off topic from like what like to Claire's question, like what's up with Milich's daughter?
Well,
and
to me, Milich's daughter, her whole really sad story, it's kind of plays into the whole class theme of the thing. It's like, this is the other side, and
Right.
and like, oh, my daughter's learning how to brush and stuff in our penthouse apartment, and but to the whole. This scene is the to me the biggest evidence of it being some sort of dreamy thing because of the fact because Tom Cruise even says, like, wait a minute, yesterday you were super pissed off about and we're gonna call the cops on these guys the day you're in bed with them, literally selling your daughter into sex slavery, like him just asking that. It's like the fact that Kubrick has them ask that question and stuff. It's very much like, wait, yeah, what the fuck? And either the answer is that guy's just really crazy and weird, this whole situation is, or it's supposed to evoke what is this kind of dreamscapey thing.
Right. And I
again,
think
aesthetic.
it's transactions again.
The first time that he encounters, they burst in the room with the girl and the two men. They're wearing a lot of makeup on their faces, and
Yeah, the men
there's
are,
things.
right?
Yeah, the men are, not the girl. And there's probably other things we could pull out of that, but it seems to be mirroring the idea of wearing masks, because when we see them the second time, when they've done the kind of rather than the like risque, they were invited there, it's a secret, they're wearing a mask by having this makeup on. The second time, they have much better posture. They're not hiding. They're not wearing
Business
any makeup.
suits, yeah.
Yeah, because it was transactional. And so that implies to me that the makeup, it wasn't a way that they got
so
off.
cool.
It wasn't like a sexual kink. It was really just supposed to be a part of their mask.
That's so
I like that.
interesting.
Yeah, because that's what I was wondering. Is the shift from the first encounter to the second encounter simply that in the second encounter, Milich was overseeing it, and so he was okay with it, whereas before they were sneaking, and he didn't like that because then it was circumventing his authority, and so that's kind of maybe why he allowed it to take place, because he is accustomed to selling his daughter on
And making $200
selling
extra
her
dollars.
body.
Well, I also,
Yeah.
to my point about one, doubling, and two, the sociological thing as it applies to women is one, the doubling is you could say that you could compare Helena, Tom Cruise's daughter. I'll wait.
No, he swallowed the wrong way.
Sorry.
Hey,
Helena with Milich's daughter, and you could argue that if Helena is being groomed to be a high-dollar prostitute, it's just that Milich, being of a lower class, is just having his daughter be a cheaper prostitute.
You should put a link to that article in the show notes, because that sounds really fucking cool. Dire, but cool.
So it's called, there's a website called the Kubrick site, which is amazing. It's
and
like
people are asking for links to all the resources and articles and stuff. So we'll get those.
Yeah,
we'll get
so
those up
it's
to you
called
guys.
the Kubrick site, and it is the best website that has just a collection of all these scholarly articles. And I devoured that whole site when I was in high school. It's been around for forever.
Okay, cool.
Anyway, so can we?
I know we're running way long, but real quick, can we talk about that final scene, and particularly Nicole Kidman's final words?
Yes, sir.
Fuck.
I think that we can also
'cause-
talk about the meaning of the
Tigers,
title.
Toy Store, or the title, yeah.
Oh,
All
yeah,
right.
that's what you asked right before we got distracted. Go ahead.
Yeah,
We'll-
but
we'll-
no.
we'll go
I
with
think
that first.
it's connected. You go first.
Yeah, I mean, okay. So obviously, this is my one-trick pony for this episode, is talking about Lacan. But I think there's something so interesting again. So generally, when Nicole Kidman is talking about sex, when she's talking about it, she says she talks about it in terms of making love, right? Except for when she talks about her dream, where everybody around her in the dream was fucking, and then when she says, and then she was fucking. And then at the end, she uses the word fuck. That's the thing that they need to do ASAP. And I 100% agree with Zizek's interpretation on this from, I think it's, what is it, A Pervert's Guide to Cinema that he did? Where he talks about this, where he says,
The Lacanian reel, yeah.
Yeah, it's almost as though at that point, he's talking about all this romantic stuff, like let's be together forever, and all of these cliches, which is one form of a type of fantasy, right? The marriage fantasy, that you have this monogamous relationship that lasts and that everything's good and it lasts forever. That's like the typical thing that you get in romantic movies, where and so you think, okay, so how are they going to reconcile? Oh, they're going to make love and reconcile. And she says, no, what we need to do is we need to fuck. And Zizek's interpretation of this is that the reason that she says as soon as possible we just need to fuck is because at that point, the real has infected both of them. The sort of pleasure that exudes their ability to exist in the previous symbolic order or according to the old codes or whatever has been shattered, right? He's a shell of what he was before. She's dealing with this traumatic event as well that kind of was initiated really from the mirror stage, which we didn't get into, but when she's looking at herself in the mirror, but then when she starts to realize herself as this desiring object and not just an object of desire. And then what happens is not in order to like get to the real, but in order to silence the real, they need to just simply fuck. And that's what it is, because that will squash this excessive need to transcend the symbolic order, and it will bring them back into maybe a new type of symbolic arrangement. But nevertheless, she doesn't use like flowery language, which would just be another form of a fantasy, but rather she uses like the brute, we just need to get down to it and fuck.
Right. So
and I think that's interesting. It's the suppression of the real, not like getting to the real.
Right. So that's what they mean by eyes wide shut.
I
Closing
think so.
yourself
I
off
think
from
so.
the real.
I think so, exactly. Because you can't look at the real. If you look at the real, it's like looking into God. You know, you can't look at God. You have to look at the burning bush, you know? And anyone who stares into the face of God will die. That's the real. You can't look at the real. The real in the cabin in the woods is the monsters at the end coming and destroying everything. That's unfettered pleasure. You can't do that. It destroys you.
So you're saying being aware that you should shut that out, or being aware that it's not. It's
Well,
elusive.
I think that there's a number of ways it can be read. One is the one that Austin is saying. Another one is just talking about the fact that, you know, they just kind of exposed this this hierarchy of power that is extremely abusive, but in the end, they can't do anything about it. So they're just like, thank God we're alive. Let's just forget about it. Our eyes are firmly shut. I think, and I'm going to bring in a philosopher here. So we did a video in December about advertising with Deadpool 2, and we talked about a philosopher named Peter Sloterdijk, and he has this idea of enlightened false consciousness. And the idea being that, like, you know, whereas Marx or someone would talk about false consciousness and how, like, the elite, imbue the lower classes with these false ideas to make them subservient, Sloterdijk talks about enlightened false consciousness, which is knowing that we're getting fucked, but, you know, we're just like it's okay. Being fucked is kind of comfortable, so we're just going to deal with it. And so similarly, I think
Happy to be alive.
Right. So I think there's kind of this enlightened false consciousness with that, is like, we know we're getting fucked by the elite, or that, you know, all of our desires are trickle down from this economic structure that, makes whores out of us all. But it's Christmas and we have our toys and our fuck toys. So our eyes are firmly and deliberately shut for sake of comfort.
See, for me, the title kind of comes from the poster of the movie and the scene in front of the mirror. It's like, it's more about the inner relationships, like it's more about deceit. Like even though you're wide open to your people you love, you're still shut off. Like, you have this kind of there's a wall between what you know and what they do.
You have to hide your desires in order
Right.
to, have any kind of a real relationship, because I think that, once again, we're all kind of slaves to our desires that definitely don't, if we just gave in to them or all the time, then it would not be conducive for a healthy relationship.
Right.
I like that.
And speaking of his the fantasy, or like his, what he's become so obsessed about, kind of like the inciting moment is that fight, and then he's kind of envisioning this this sex scene with our naval officer. You know, Jared and I have been laughing for a while about what was that day like, the shoot day like, for that naval officer who just had to, like, make love to Nicole Kidman. And if it was a 400-day shooting schedule, it must have been at least, an 8-hour shooting day. Turns out it's 6 full days.
6 full days of a man getting paid to have sex with Nicole Kidman.
Naked, yeah. And we read that, Tom Cruise was not allowed at all in the room, was not allowed on the set for those days, just so his mind can go crazy. This is his wife being, fondled for 6 full days by this naval officer.
Oh, wow. So it was
Kubrick
method
was
directing.
such a dick.
Yeah, Kubrick seems like he was a complete dick. I mean, it was like psychoanalysis.
Hey, he made
the whole
good movies,
time.
God damn it.
He made great films.
He made good movies, and if I may say, I mean, these people like Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman, They are the biggest stars in the world, getting paid tens of millions of dollars to do this movie. They're never in a situation in their lives
To do
where
this movie? I don't know about that. Man.
Typically, it was like a $20 million a movie was
I don't
their,
think they
was
got
his
paid
fee,
their rate.
but this was not.
cumulatively, perhaps.
But they're doing all right.
They're doing all right.
Yeah.
Point is that they live lives in which they're never challenged with anything. No one ever tells them no. They're always, affirmed at every corner of the way. God forbid these people have an asshole boss for once in their lives. I mean, come on.
400
I love
days.
it. I
love it
this
too.
one
Fuck
shit.
these people. I
had-
mean, they may getting $20 million to, big fucking whoop. They have to
Yeah.
they have to do stuff they don't like. Fuck them.
I'm going to make a prediction that in their heart of hearts, like they signed up for a fucking Kubrick movie. And
Oh,
they're like,
yeah,
I'm going to go
absolutely.
for a year, 400 days. They didn't know that at
They
the
signed up for
beginning.
6 months,
They,
yeah.
they signed up for 6 months and then went for 400 days. I bet you that that Tom Cruise is kind of disappointed in this movie.
No, I don't think so, man.
You don't
He
think
I
that
do
those,
not.
You don't think that
so
those
hard.
what?
He's such a gentleman, Tom Cruise. Like he never once spoke one bad word about the movie,
Well,
about
right,
the
yeah,
process.
but that's what I'm saying. Do you think in his mind he's like, God damn it, I spent a fucking over a year
well, look
of
at
my
us.
life
We're
with
here
that movie.
celebrating the
I mean,
movie,
No,
man.
I think Tom
he
Cruise
has
loves
to be
it.
a little bit upset about it because it
bet
basically
Nicole Kidman
ruined
doesn't
his
like it.
career a little, didn't it?
What are
I
you
don't think
talking
it
about?
ruined his career. No
Absolutely
way.
not.
This movie
It
was
was
bad for
Tom
everyone involved, dude.
I mean, fine, but Tom Cruise when it comes to we live in the era now where there's not a single star, including Jennifer Lawrence, who can open a movie just based on star power. But the last person to actually have that power was Tom Cruise, and that only ended less than 7 years ago.
I
It
mean,
was the
he's.
jumping on the sofa at Oprah's where people started to kind of go,
Oh man, I
don't
think
know.
he's.
Who
I think
gives
he's
a
the
fuck?
biggest pro, man.
Yeah,
He
who
is
gives
such
who gives a fuck? He jumps
gentleman
on a
actor.
sofa. That motherfucker can act.
He was happy,
incredible.
man. He was in a relationship.
Is it
with a
Les
girl half his
Grossman?
age, whatever,
Les
man.
Grossman,
Let
the
the guy
best.
have a little expression of joy. I mean, I don't.
And then in 1999, I mean, they filmed this in '96, but in '99, man, you got Magnolia, and
Yeah.
you got
Yeah.
this fucking movie. Oh shit!
Yeah,
man.
that was his.
What a
Okay,
good Tom Cruise
I kind
year.
of saw it as it was people rightly or wrongly criticized his ability to act so much after this movie that he didn't get to show the Tom Cruise flashing the smiles,
Right.
make everyone in the theater drop their panties kind of deal that if not maybe it's hyperbole to say it ruined his career, but it definitely changed the image of Tom Cruise.
Yeah, they got
as
a
an
lot of shit
actor.
for this
But
movie.
Kubrick didn't want him to use any of that charm, any of that stuff. He was he was trying to get other takes to make sure that wasn't the case, that wasn't presented. From what I could read these articles that I was reading last night, is that Tom Cruise was trying his hardest to please his master, to do whatever it took. And in case it's also meta now that we're thinking, meta, you should be bringing this up, Jared. But it was he was trying so hard to please his master, whatever it did, whatever it took. He put himself totally in his hands.
You can see that.
But then it's funny that Kubrick picks some of the most boring takes ever, I imagine. If he's got 95 takes of every shot, Bill is a pretty boring character. He's pretty just aimless and wandering around. There's not a lot of.
No,
there's
I
not
I
a
think
lot
it's
of
a
I think
moments.
he's-
symbolic,
I think he's
sociological bird's eye view. It's not a character
Yeah,
story.
I think that's right. But I don't know, man. We're here celebrating Tom Cruise in this great movie, and I think they got a lot of shit for it because it wasn't all it was hyped up to be. But it's
so
still
much
a
hype.
masterpiece. I think.
Stanley Kubrick died. Last movie ever, sexiest movie ever, starring the two biggest,
Stars in the
sexiest
world.
stars in the world. Of course, there's going to be ridiculous hype that went way over budget. The studio's going to want to pimp the shit out of the idea that there are naked stars in this movie. They market it as the most sensual movie ever made. It ends up not being that. So of course, people are going to react negatively to it.
I'm just saying that his reputation at the time. Tom Cruise is like, God damn it! I wish I was in fucking Full Metal Jacket.
Oh, I see what you're saying. You're just saying
Like
people-
Eyes Wide Shut is not considered the accessible mainstream classic that some of
other
Kubrick's
films.
other movies, while still being fucking weird as hell, are.
But this is a complete
man, I mean-
Kubrick masterpiece. I wonder
he got to be in the Kubrick canon. I mean, come
yeah,
on.
I
That's-
guess that's
great.
something. I guess that's worth it.
And 20 years later it's I wonder if his because he's got all the other movies under his belt. He's got all the other ones. But I guess
yeah.
I don't know. He got to
Just
fucking
me
do
speculating.
it. He got to experience the process, and also I don't think Cruise is a director. Is he? He's directing?
No,
He's
he's
producer.
never directed.
But he's so in love. I mean, he just must have been I get to spend this much time with the master, learning it all.
Yeah, no, I'm not. I have
oh,
no
man.
doubt he had a lot of fun making the movie.
Yeah, you just think that might have been disappointed by it. But anyway, that was a great episode and a great movie.
Yeah.
It's such an interesting movie. I feel like, again, this is one of those films that that suffers because of particular expectations that were not met.
I don't
think
believe. I mean,
20
like
years
we're 20
later-
years later. We have none of the hype built up. It's more we're looking at the movie as a movie, and I love the movie like with you guys, but it's still like I said, it's not. In fact, let's go. What's everyone's top 3 Kubricks? Is this the end of the episode?
man.
Can we say that?
Yeah, I think Claire has to go, so she should go first, right?
What's your top 3 favorite Kubricks?
What time is it?
Is Eyes Wide Shut in anyone's
yeah.
top 3 favorites?
Claire, favorite Kubrick movies?
The Shining.
Number 1?
Lolita.
Whoa.
And those are the only 2 I've ever seen.
What? You never seen 2001?
I thought you said you had seen A Clockwork Orange.
No, I've read A Clockwork Orange.
Oh, okay.
No, there is a difference there. I've not seen A Clockwork Orange. I feel like maybe I miscommunicated my level of familiarity with Kubrick.
No, not at all, not at all. I didn't expect you to be a master.
You don't need your card to join this club.
Yeah. Austin, what about you?
Good. That was a good line.
My favorite Kubrick film is actually The Killing.
So good.
Yeah.
I've never
I
seen that.
I
I've
actually
heard of
really
that.
like black and white Kubrick almost more than color. So, but I will. I mean, right now I'm just gonna say I love Eyes Wide Shut third, just because I can't stop thinking about it, and I didn't sleep last night because of it. So I'll put it in third just because. But The Killing is my favorite, and then for number 2, just because I feel like it's obligatory, 2001.
See, when you said black and white, I thought you were going to say Paths of Glory, because I think that movie has the best ending scene of all time.
That might actually be my third favorite in real life, but because I'm obsessed right now with Eyes Wide Shut, because again I couldn't sleep last
But in
night.
Dream World, it's Eyes Wide
yeah.
Shut. Jacob?
Man, I'm just like, oh God, I think, God,
It's too hard.
Oh, it's too hard. I love Barry Lyndon. I'd probably put that as number 2. Oh, it's The Shining or 2001 as number 1, and I guess they kind of go in that order. But Eyes Wide Shut's up there. I don't know, man. It's too hard. They're all so good.
Yeah, I mean, for me,
I love Doctor Strange. I love all of them.
Yeah, how could you pick between Doctor Strangelove 2001, Clockwork Orange? I mean, for me, The Shining is not on
I like
the
The
top.
Shining more
Barry
than Clockwork
Lyndon.
Orange,
Barry
although I
Lyndon.
love it.
I know Ryan's going to shit himself, but Barry Lyndon might be number 1 for me.
I love it.
That's fucking.
Oh, we didn't talk about
That's
how
fucking
this is, like,
insane.
we should say really quick. Oh,
Now the 3 Kubrick movies I've seen are not in anyone's top 3, and they're not the Kubrick movies I
Yeah,
should have
no
seen.
one has said Eyes Wide Shut very
I know
significantly.
yeah.
But yeah, my number 1's Full Metal Jacket, then The Shining, and then probably Paths of Glory, and then with a close 4th, 2001.
By the way, rest in peace. What is it, Lee Ermey?
Or Arlie
Arlie
Ermey, yeah.
Ermey, yeah.
Arlie,
And
he
this
just-
isn't
he just
related,
passed.
but fucking Milos Forman is dead.
Yeah.
I know.
That sucks.
But you were going to say, you said earlier
Okay,
today about, like,
one
how
last thing.
all Kubrick
Yeah,
movies are like 50-50.
something about this movie that is very Kubrick-esque is that it's like a movie that's cut in half. So Barry Lyndon is literally cut in half. It's the first half is the rise, the second half
Right.
is the fall. There's even title cards. A Clockwork Orange, everyone he meets in the beginning, so the homeless guy, the homeless guys, his friends, the woman, and like the guy in the wheelchair. He meets them in the first half, abuses them, and then they abuse him in the second half.
2001 as The Apes, and then The Future. Does that count?
No, I don't think that one works. But so it's Barry Lyndon, Clockwork Orange, and then this one, Eyes Wide Shut. So there's leading up to the orgy. He meets Milich and his daughter. He meets Mrs. Nathanson, and he meets Domino. And then in the second half, he calls Mrs. Nathanson again. He sees that Milich's daughter has become a real prostitute, and he goes to Domino's apartment, and realizes she has HIV. So it's also cut down the
And the
middle
other
like
prostitute,
that.
the one who dies.
This is
saves her.
also a psychoanalytic thing. It's the reversion of A overpowering B, turning into B over empowering A, and you get that kind of through other things. And then the other element of that is that C observes A over empowering B, and then B over empowering A, and you get that in this one in particular with Tom Cruise getting humiliated, kind of down in the middle. So there's always an observer as well, or you just have the audience is observing.
And it's the
these
same
Okay,
structure
I
as The
gotta go,
Hangover.
friends.
Claire, good to see you. Good to
All
hear
right,
from you.
For the editing.
Yeah,
for
thanks so much for having me on. I'm gonna go watch Barry Lyndon, I think, after I get home for the day.
Okay,
That's
cool.
like
You're
Claire,
what
just-
I've gotten
You're
out
bored
of
out of
this.
your fucking mind.
Yeah.
Claire, just give me one thing. Just give me a bye so we can edit it in.
A bye?
Yeah, just say goodbye.
Like bye.
Oh, okay. Yeah. All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
See you later,
Okay,
Claire.
awesome. All right, see you, Claire.
Bye.
Also, the Killing was split in half because there's the setup to the heist, and
That's
there's
right.
the heist. I'm just trying to
Yeah.
go off of your thing.
It's been a while.
He's
I haven't seen The
probably
Killing in
like
forever. Or never.
oh
I mean,
my
I've never
God.
seen it. Sorry, I've
Speaking
never
of
seen
a last scene that makes you feel. That last scene hurts my heart so
Yeah.
bad, and I don't want to give spoilers. But
In The
people go see
Killing?
The Killing.
Okay. See, the last scene that makes me cry is in Past the
Passive
Glory.
It's great. That little bar scene.
Yeah.
Well, but not in like an actual like emotional cry, but more just like you're so frustrated and.
That's how I cried in 2001. I start crying of frustration, although I love it.
The last movie that made me cry was Coco.
Oh, I
So,
cried by
everyone
nuts off.
cried.
Let's
that movie.
move on. God damn it!
All
I
right.
mean, shoot, I cry at like a pharmaceutical ad commercial if it's done well enough.
I cried in episode 8 of Twin Peaks of the new.
I never
Twin Peaks.
fucking cry at anything, and I cried in Coco. But let's keep going.
All right. Well, that's all I've got today. I want to remind everybody that if you like what we do, consider supporting us on Wisecrack Plus on Patreon. So go to wisecrackplus.com. You can even join us as a guest on one of our podcasts. Last episode, we did Fargo, and we had our first Patreon podcast correspondent, Jonathan Ramirez. You also get access to the Wisecrack Discord server, which I'm currently arguing with people about The Last Jedi on. And you'll also get Wisecrack Edition extra podcasts and lots of other cool things. So
You've
check
also
us
got
out.
some merch. If you want merch, Jared's wearing our first ever Show Me the Meaning t-shirt. You can get that at wisecrack.store, or the link is in the description. I'm wearing the hoodie, which you can also get. And and where can we find each other on the internet, everybody?
Well, you can find me on Facebook or YouTube at Ryan Shorts. I have a very good particular Ryan short tomorrow called The Man Behind the Man Behind the Muppets. It's about the true story behind the Muppets. If you'd like to figure out what that is, then go check it out.
Awesome.
I want to go figure that. I will be tuning into that. Actually,
Ryan's shorts are
and
awesome.
You can
Thank
find
you,
me
Jacob.
on Twitter, Austin_Hayden, Hayden.
I follow you now.
I do too.
Yeah.
I get your notifications all the time.
I do,
in the middle of the night.
and I regret it. I got to be honest, Austin. I love podcast Austin. One day I hope to meet real Austin, but Twitter Austin, man, what an asshole.
Hey, shots fired.
No, it's okay.
Dun, dun, dun,
You know me. I'm a
dun,
Zizekian in that I like this ritualized obscenity that gives more, intimacy. Right?
Eyes wide shut.
Jacob, can we find you on the internet?
You can find me at everything Wisecrack. We're at Jacob Solomon for myself, or anything that's Wisecrack. YouTube.com/Wisecrack. At
Yep.
Wisecrack. Facebook.com/WisecrackEDU.
Fuck yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, that's it for today. Thanks, everybody. Thank you, Jacob, Austin, and Claire, and Ryan for joining us.
Hell yeah, I love movies so much.
Yeah. Thank you guys. And thank you to the YouTubes for watching live. And we'll catch you guys soon.
Bye-bye.
What movie are we covering next week?
I don't know.
I think
I
maybe
do
Sex,
know.
Lies, and Videotape.
We're
Maybe.
doing Sex, Lies, and Videotape, maybe.
Maybe. I'm
All
trying
right.
to push for Election, Sideways, Being John Malkovich. Maybe.
Oh man, you're giving away all of our
Devil Wears
maybes?
Prada. I'm just putting out some. I'm trying to like.
All right,
Get
all
the
those
fans
sounds
to-
fun.
I just
get
want to
the groove.
do. I just want to do all the Kubrick movies.
I thought we were doing Land Before Time. Was that,
Let's
is
do that.
I
Oh,
want to
no,
do
me
all
and-
the
me and-
Takashi Miike movies, Visitor
hell
Q,
yeah.
the
Dead or
Happiness of
Alive.
the Catakaras, Audition.
I'm trying to figure out which
Itchy the
movie can we
Killer?
do to get the least possible viewers on
It's
YouTube.
be one of
it's
them,
definitely
probably.
Sex, Lies, and Videotape.
Yeah, I think that might be it. Because
That's absolute
Itchy the Killer would be
zero.
awesome. But yeah, I'm trying to figure out like, what movie could we choose that would get like 8 viewers. That would be amazing as a contest.
I don't think last year at Marion Bad.
All right, everybody. Thanks so much.
All right, bye-bye.
Love and
Catch y'all
peace.
later. Peace.